What is up, you guys? It is Alessandro Koenig, and today we have a special guest with us, Paris Scobie.
Woo! Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure meeting you in person last weekend at the Scottsdale Run Club. I cannot wait to dive into my story, but just to tell you guys a little bit about me, who I am, what I'm about, and what I do. My name is Paris Scobie. I'm the host of Live Well Bipolar. I am the author of this book right here, Crooked Illness, Lessons from Inside and Outside Hospital Walls. And I'm a professional speaker sharing my experiences to help people overcome shame associated with living with mental illness. So we're going to get into all the things today, and I can't wait.
I love it. You see, guys, we're already high energy to start off the podcast. That's how you got to do it. So first question, which is honestly one of the best ones, it is going to be, why did you create your podcast? Like, what's the root of the passion that made you create this?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So it actually started it was February of 2020. So you guys all know it was actually right before COVID hit. And I had this idea because I talk about a lot of it actually stem from this book right here, which is actually my story. So it's called Crooked Illness, Lessons from Inside and Outside Hospital Walls. But I started the podcast because at 19 years old, I was diagnosed, hospitalized with bipolar 1 disorder. And a lot of the things that I was very afraid to express, overcoming certain traumas, getting into sexual assault, suicidal ideation, suicide attempt, a lot of these dark topics that I've lived through and experienced, I thought that I reached a full circle moment. So to tell you guys the truth, that a few years after that hospitalization, I came home, had my diagnosis. I ended up graduating from college, and I went back and I worked at the same exact hospital where I was a patient at. So I was thinking, this is awesome. I'm going to be able to help so many people overcome similar barriers that I'm still experiencing. But what ended up happening was it actually kind of backfired. I felt like the entire time I didn't belong there. I was an imposter. I tricked the system. What would people think if they found out that I was a patient here? What would people think if they knew this information? So it just constantly kept hanging over me. And I felt like, I was like, you know what? The only way that I'm going to be able to get rid of this shame, get rid of this fear, of these hesitations of what's going to happen if I'm exposed or people find out about my experiences, right? I felt very isolated because I did not actually know any other human beings living with bipolar disorder other than going to Google and typing in people diagnosis. You see celebrities, you see all this stuff, right? But people that I knew in my real life, I didn't know anyone else. So I was like, this is something I need to keep to myself. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. I don't really know what this means. And I decided just to start with myself, what I was ready to be sharing, which was a little bit about my experiences. I started off talking about going to therapy. Why did I get into therapy? What did therapy help me with, right? So a lot of that came down to me being able to see I'm never going to be able to make the impact that I want to unless I can get over this hurdle, which is put there by me, because I was the one creating these stories of fears and what would people think, when really, what is the worst thing that can happen if you share your story, if you put it out there and you have an intention to help other people who are feeling the same way, they're feeling alone, they're feeling crushed by something. So I launched the podcast, and it was so funny because the very first episode, you will hear me. So it was nothing like the setup that you have right now. I know you're on like episode 5 or 6. When I was on episode 1, I was in the back of my parents' house speaking into my phone, rocks crunching in the background. I was walking, I was recording into my phone. And then I finished the episode and I was like, shit, you need to have a name for the podcast. You need to have an episode name. I don't have any of this stuff. And I was like, I just sat there thinking, and I was like, well, I have a Microsoft Word document where I'm kind of working on my story a little bit. It wasn't really too planned out. And I was like, I'll just call it Crooked Illness. That's what I'll name it. I'll name it this, and I'll name the first episode The Relationship Between Our Physical and Mental Health. And that's what I did. I hit send, and then I ended up shooting it off to like all the friends that I knew. And I was like, hey guys, I started this new thing, this podcast. And I remember feeling so excited, but then also at the same time, very crushed, because I remember getting a text back from someone who was like, I don't even listen to podcasts. I don't have time for stuff like this. I don't really care about this stuff. I'm not really interested. And I was just like, dang, like maybe this is not the best idea. Maybe this is kind of stupid. Like, why am I putting myself out here like this? What am I doing? Right. So getting inside my head, but I remember just feeling so drawn to continue sharing and continue. And then from there, it blossomed into me bringing other people on from all over the world. And now the podcast, obviously, started out Crooked Illness. Then I ended up going through a change, a rebrand, calling it Master Your Mental, and then going through another change and rebrand called Live Well Bipolar. And that was always the core messaging behind why I started it, is because I really wanted to be able to discover for myself, how can I be able to have a quality of life that I've always dreamed of, that I've always thought, this isn't really something I can achieve or something that I can make happen. And then obviously bipolar disorder and living with mental illness, navigating that. There's so many people, you hear the statistics, 1 in 5 people at one point in their life will be impacted by mental health condition. They'll go through either losing someone to suicide, or maybe you have a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a best friend, somebody in your life who who has either been hospitalized, struggled with their mental health, going through these barriers of what medication works for me, is therapy a fit, like all of these questions that we're always faced with. So I said I wanted to be able to create a place for people to go to consume content and episodes catered to, what does this look like for me if I live with bipolar disorder, or if I love someone who does, or if I do work in the field. I want to understand more from people's lived experience, and I want to be able to understand how to, first of all, overcome that shame, and then be able to really have somewhere where people can feel like they're connected, and really to show people like there's so much more that we can control versus that we can't. And there's small little shifts that we can implement into our days, and just really how to make that happen. So that's kind of the story of how it came to be. It's been 4.5 years going now strong. I'm at like 211 episodes, like over 130 countries listen to the episode. It's a top 1% globally ranked podcast. It's been a lot of the years in the works, but it would be nothing that it is today without the guests, without my friends, without the listeners, without the community. It's all the people outside of myself, but it's just me choosing to take that step and start.
I love that. That's awesome. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's not easy to get to that point. So
thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I gotta ask, what drives you to get out of bed? Like, because before all this podcasting, like you had to develop yourself as a person to be the individual that can handle the podcast. So what drove you to get out of bed to build your life to be with the podcast?
Yeah. So what drove me was really remembering my old self, right? I do everything that I do today for the younger Paris, right? 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years this coming December of when I was hospitalized, diagnosed, and all this stuff. But I do it because I remember how alone I felt, how scared I felt, how much shame it felt. And it didn't only just affect my thoughts, it affected my behaviors, it affected my relationships, it affected my career, it affected just how I saw the world around me. It was so much negativity and feeling crippled and stuck and overwhelmed with all of these emotions and feelings. And a lot of it was underneath, how do I navigate this thing? Because really, bipolar disorder is just one part of your human experience. It's not your entire identity, who you are. It's an experience that you've had and you're living, and you've received this diagnosis. So now, just like anything else, if you were to receive a diagnosis of a physical condition or diabetes or cancer, we don't treat it the same way. And that's what gets me out of the bed in the morning as well, is helping other people overcome the stigma, because there's so much stigma attached to, if you were to say, I was in a psych hospital, and people might be like, some people might be like, oh, like why? Like what happened? Fearful and things like that. But then if you see someone who went through, major surgery, or had, a kidney surgery, or, had survived a heart attack or a stroke or something like that, we wouldn't look at that person the same way as we would someone who's dealing with a mental health crisis, right? And I feel like a lot of that has to do with what we feel is in control, right? Because I think we can see people going through these things and think, why can't you just snap out of it and take back control and like get out of your, what is it like to not be able to get out of bed and to experience so many of these dark thoughts? But really so much of it is a brain health condition, but really that's why I'm all about sharing the research, right? So it's not just on the podcast, it's not just my lived experience, it's also guests who also live with bipolar, or they have a loved one, they're researchers, they're psychiatrists, they're psychologists, and then they also come on and share these experiences and what have you actually seen be successful, and people being able to walk away from an appointment, walk away from a conversation, feeling like I have the power now to take back that control that I feel has been stripped of me with just instantaneously being handed a label of this is what you're dealing with, right? So really that's what drives me, is just helping people overcome that stigma, but then continuing it for myself, because no matter how many years of work I've dedicated to this, I can just so easily slip back into, and again, it's day by day, right? So I have a very solid routine and things like that we can get into, but a lot of it is just driven by helping people overcome that shame, overcome that stigma, and then also continue putting out this content to really be that resource for people who have felt they can't find anything that's making sense.
Awesome. And this is going to be a different question that I just came up with. I really like this one a lot. It's a great topic. How do you handle rejection? Because that's a key factor in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
We know that rejection is the biggest thing that can affect our mental health. One of the biggest things, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we overcome that so that we can move forward and actually be better people?
Yeah, so I've learned this over the years, is my view on rejection has changed, because at first I used to feel like it was such a personal thing, right? It was something inherently wrong or defective with me, but I really see it as an opportunity to continue to learn and grow, right? Or there's many phases of rejection, right? You could talk about, maybe I wanted to come out on your podcast and you said, no, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you, right? So that's rejection. Or it's a rejection, say that, you're dealing with your friend who's single and they're trying to go on a date and this person says no, like, I don't want to date you or whatever. There's so many forms of, or even being turned down from a job or an opportunity to do a partnership or something. So I feel like for me, I always look at things with an open lens of, this wasn't a fit right now, but it's outside of my control, right? I can sit there all day long and question, oh, is it something within me? Do they not like me as a person? Did I sound stupid, right? We can get in our head all day and just go over the questions. But at the end of the day, it's important to really just try to continue to do the things that are going to help you grow and move forward. But it's also okay to like sit in that moment of when you're faced with rejection and feel the emotions and feelings attached to it. It's not good just to like, okay, turn it off, push past it, go, like constantly just let it go, but to really do what works for you. I know people cope and deal with things differently. And I know for me, it helps to really just understand, okay, maybe, say that there was an event, right, coming up that I was super excited. I was going to be speaking at this event possibly. And then I found out that it's not going to be this year. So I could say, okay, like, thank you for the opportunity. You'll keep me in mind for a future, whatever it is. So that's an example of, what I do today as a speaker for different events and conferences. So really just knowing that, again, there's so much more that's out there that you have inside of you to help, and to not let it get you down and let it make you feel like you need to quit and stop going, because we're always going to be faced with it. There's always going to be no's. There's always going to be things that are getting turned down. Things are always going to be changing. But if you continue to stay true to your purpose and remind yourself, why am I doing this in the beginning? Why am I even doing this? To start with that, always go back to your why, then you'll always be able to make it through. But it will be challenging, obviously. It's not like an easy thing you just turn on and off. But yeah, that's kind of how I've managed it and how I've changed over the years. I used to really let it get me down and almost quit a lot of times.
Yeah. It's like you understanding that you're going to place your value on yourself, like not the rejection. Like you can't put expectations on a yes to make you feel better. You got to put expectations on yourself. Like, this is what I'm trying to be like. And no matter what happens, what the outcome is, I'm still going to grow for me. Mm-hmm. Not because I got rejected, but it's because I love myself. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about, and a lot of educators. And it was something that stuck with me to this day,
Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because especially when you're going into why is this something that matters? Your mindset in terms of rejection and failure and overcoming obstacles, because that is a lot of when I think back to how I used to live my life versus how I do today. There's a lot of things that I change, a lot of habits that I've been able to evolve over time, but it's just giving yourself the grace and the opportunity to say, I know something needs to change. I know something is off, something feels off, whether it's in your friendships, your relationship with yourself, just how you're carrying yourself, right? It's being able to tune into that and say, what can I do to take back control of this? What do I need more of? And then also, what do I need less of?
Exactly. 100%. And it just makes you a better person overall because now you're actually like reconstructing a way for you to live a better life instead of taking the victim stance. It's out of my control. Like, no, it's not. Like, some things are, but that isn't. And you got to understand what the difference is, you know? And so the next question is going to be, how does your podcast, this is a big one, how does your podcast help other people specifically? Because I know like you key in on bipolar disorder and different mental health issues, but give me like specific examples of people that you've been able to impact because of your podcast.
Yeah. So an example I can give you is I had a woman reach out to me, right? And she actually, I remember she sent me a message and she told me that she had an accident happen to her. She was on bed rest for about a year and she was diagnosed with bipolar, and she's also a therapist as well. So she said she was just on Google and she was looking up bipolar podcasts and just different things on that. And she said she came across my show and she said, I was listening to your episodes and I kept hearing you interviewing people, and I would hear them talk about their experiences without shame. Like they all didn't, like there was shame, like stripping away in each episode. And she said, the more I listened to these, the more it inspired and encouraged me to start my own page and sharing my own experiences. And then I actually got to have her on the show. So it was like a full circle moment because she reached out and she told me that. I didn't actually know that, but she said, I've been listening to your podcast for, since I found you. And now I'm here being able to share what my story is. And then I had another person reach out to me and say that she was sitting in the hospital and then she came home from her hospitalization and was doing research online. And she said she came across, again, my podcast. And she said it actually inspired her to be able to go out and start her own podcast and really build her own community. And then something else is there was a man who sent me a really long email like this. I was so surprised. I got this and it was just like, I probably could spend like 5-10 minutes just reading the whole email. And he was telling me, he said, I just want you to know that I'm 65 years old and I've lived my entire life struggling with this thing that I was diagnosed with. And he said, you're my hero. And I look up to you and I admire what you're doing because now I feel like I can be free and share this with the people closest to me and be able to come out of this headspace that I'm in. So it's just really cool to hear stuff like that when people send you messages or someone else actually walked up to my husband, came up to me and he told me, he was like, this guy came up to me and he was telling me that his wife was listening to my episodes because I did an interview with him. So I had Dan on the podcast and then he was like, yeah, so at first we just started out with that episode, but then she ended up continuing to listen to the episodes. And she said, he was like, this actually is helping us a lot because we have a son who is going through a lot of things right now. We're not exactly sure what it is. We don't know if it's bipolar, what kind of mental health, or even if it is something, right? But he was saying that this is really helping her understand how to be a better support for her son. So, and I feel like it's stuff like that that just makes you see, wow, this actually is making a difference. Because I feel like sometimes we can, start something, say that we have a podcast, a YouTube channel, a blog, whatever we're doing, right? We can be so in the weeds and in the work that we really think, is this even worth it? Is this dumb? Is this like what is this really doing,
Yeah.
And it's being able to be continuously met with that. And I mean, even someone else sending me a message the other day and she's like, I'm listening to your audiobook right now. And she finished it in the same day and was just like, this is amazing. Like, 'cause she has my book, but she's like, I really wanted the audiobook. And it's just so cool to see people so invested in my story because they see themselves in it. And she was like, I went through the same thing when I was in my early 20s. And it's just so cool because she was like, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm 55 years old. And it's just people of all ages. Like, I've had people in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 40s. Like, it's just people all over the world. So it just really shows you that a lot of us right now listening to this, you already have a story inside of you. You already have a part of your lived experience that you might be sitting there super ashamed of. Like, this, I absolutely cannot share this with the world. I need to hide this. This is embarrassing. But really, this is a part of your experience that can not only help yourself come out of dark days that you're having, but it can help other people because it puts a face to the name, right? When we think about bipolar, you might think, oh, like, I see movies or TV shows and we see people in the hospitals and they're you hear the words, right? Crazy, insane, she's all over the place. Like, this person's just a mess, right? We see all these perceptions, but when you can actually put a face, and I have over like 200 of them now that people can go and say, and again, like, if it's not my face, it's someone else's face, right? So I have a guy who I interviewed who he's he's literally people of all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all ages, all cultures. You know, if you're sitting there listening, like, you know, you might be listening to this saying, well, you know, I'm a young African-American guy. Like, I don't see any black men on the internet talking about bipolar. I have an episode for you. You might be sitting there. I'm a young woman. I'm Asian American. I have an episode for you. Like, I have something for everyone. And if I don't, then I'll make it. So
that's incredible, because you're literally giving them a voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest reason why I had to get into podcasting myself, was just giving the people that don't have a voice. And that's what you've been able to do. Like, you've set that example, which is so inspiring for me to like witness that. That's incredible, because you've literally done what I'm trying to achieve one day, is giving so many people a voice that now they can select.
Mm-hmm.
They have a category of selection. Like, nope, there's no excuse. That's incredible. Like, there's literally, because in life, there are so many strict cases. Like, we're in 2024. There's so many people going through a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that so many times where people feel like they're alone. Nobody's going through what I'm going through.
Mm-hmm.
And if they would just watch a podcast of somebody that went through the same experience as them, they wouldn't feel alone anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that's personally helped me out. It's definitely helped you out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of other people, but
Right.
yeah, it's a big one.
I love that. I love that you say that. And thank you for the kind words. It really means a lot, because I mean, especially considering this is something I told myself I would never share, because there's an episode that I did called The Lies Bipolar Told Me. And it's a solo episode where I actually talk about, I didn't think I'd ever find a loving and supportive partner. I didn't think I'd ever have any kind of success in any kind of career. And there were so many things that I said, I can't have or be or do this because of bipolar, right? And I bet you there's so many people listening to this who, whether or not you have a diagnosis, you know, you probably know someone who does. Maybe you know someone very close to you who's struggling. But even then, like, we all have mental health, right? Whether or not we have a diagnosis, we've had hospitalization, it doesn't matter like the extent or what the circumstances are. We've all had days where we feel hopeless. We've had losses, right? We've all gone through deaths, right? Losing people close to us, losing opportunities. So I think it's so important to find that community, like you said, and be able to put that voice out there, because that's what helped me be able to have the confidence to do what I did, because it started with me. I'm going to share my story. And I told you guys in the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. I was in my parents' backyard at the house, rocks crunching in the background, talking into my phone. And then from there, I had someone be like, why don't you interview people where you can see them? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And it's always people pushing you out of your comfort zone. And I think another fear I had was publishing this book. I was like, I was so scared. I'm like, I was writing this and I was always working on it. And I would always say, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do, right? And we always have this, I don't know, what ifs. And then again, it came down from me interviewing so many authors. I read about 30 to 40 books every year. And a lot of those books are people that I've had on the podcast. People
really?
A lot of the people that I have on the podcast have written either memoirs or stories of their own. But again, it was those people who would always ask me at the end of every episode, so tell me more about you. What are you working on? What are you doing? And I would always try to pivot the question because I was so uncomfortable. Like, I hated talking about myself. And I'd be like, well, like, I'm kind of working on a story, a book. And then eventually it was like, these people were the ones who connected me with, here's who to use for an editor. Here's who to use for a cover designer. Here's how to do. So it was all those things that I said, I don't know how to do. Now they're right in front of me. Now I just need to finish it and write it. And that's what I did. I actually finished the book and I released it in October of 2021. So but the podcast, so Timeline podcast has been around now for about almost 4.5 years.
Wow.
This October, my book will have been out for 3 years. And then I got into speaking, right? Obviously with the podcast, but then doing a lot of work for different nonprofits. One of the biggest ones that I work for is NAMI. So they're the National Alliance for Mental Illness. They have different grassroots locations all across the US and really just traveling for different conferences and speaking. But that was a big fear I had too. I had a fear around, who am I to start a podcast? Who am I to be an author? Who am I to be a speaker? Because we are always the ones getting in our own way. We're always the ones stopping. And it's so true because of the feedback, right? I mean, you're getting these messages, these DMs, these emails. This has helped me with this. And it's like, does it still not feel like it's enough for you? So you really got to find that purpose within yourself or else it truly isn't going to be enough. It's truly going to continue just to eat at you. But if you can stay true to your purpose and know, I am doing this because I want other people to not feel isolated and alone. I want them to know that there's hope out there. I want them to know there's a lot that they can control. There's obviously, we can't go back to the past. We can't fix certain events or different traumas we've experienced, but we can cultivate a routine, cultivate our relationship with ourselves to heal that, heal the ones that we have closest to us, and really just, and there's so many pieces of the puzzle, but we can start with one at a time.
I love that. And it's, it's really interesting about the topic of fear is it's such a key factor in mental health, because I was filming for a solar company and the manager of the solar company brought something up because we were cliff jumping. And this is a good analogy, what I'm already going to bring up, but it's crazy because like when you think about it, overthinking, oh, look how far that is. Oh my goodness, that's all the way down there. When all you had to do was just go jump. Just face your fears and jump. And that's the same thing with like uncomfortable positioning with your business or podcasting or people giving you feedback. Sometimes you take it personal. Sometimes you're like, whoa, like my body wants to run away from this. As David Goggin talks about, the mind always wants to run away from uncomfortability. But as long as you keep facing it, then you trick the brain. The brain's like, well, now we have no other choice but just do it. And it's just the same thing. I love just like the cliff jumping analogy, because when you just jump and you don't think about how tall the cliff is or anything else, you are able to succeed and just make the jump happen and not be scared.
Okay, when you're talking about cliff jumping, that's hilarious you say that, because we were on our honeymoon and we were in Greece and there was this cliff. So I ended up, I did do it, but at first my husband made fun of me because he just went and did it. And like I was recording him and then he was like supposed to record me. Yeah. And he told me, he's like, he has the video still. It's literally me running to the edge, looking, running back, going back. And then I finally did it. But he like made fun of me because he's like, you jumped and you could have jumped further out, but you jumped like closer. And I was like, I don't know. I just didn't do it. And then I ended up doing it again. But I think we always make things so much worse in our head. I feel like it's the same with roller coasters. Like exactly. I love roller coasters. I love stuff like that. But I remember it's the same fear of I'm going to get hurt, whether it's physically hurt or mentally hurt, like the mental pain of rejection and failure and shutting something down. I think I tell people all the time, like, never be afraid of that, because you can always pivot. You can always change. And I think that's so true in life and business and whatever thing that we're doing, we're pursuing. And it's so true to just stay true to your purpose and your mission. And if it doesn't feel it aligns, it doesn't align. And an example I can give you guys is I actually used to do coaching and I hated it. Like I was like, okay, the people I was working with they're getting something out of it. They're benefiting, they're sharing these testimonials with me. But I was like, I just feel like I'm being forced into this. And I wasn't. I don't know why I felt like that. Yeah. I did not enjoy it. And it's not to say that I won't ever go back to that in the future one day. I just decided that this isn't for me right now. I'm not going to continue to do this. I'm not going to continue to accept clients. I'm not going to continue to renew people. I'm going to stop doing this. And it actually almost got me to quit my podcast. It got me to, I was like, I'm going to quit my podcast. I'm never going to talk about my book again. I'm never going to do speaking anymore. I'm just done with all of it. And I was letting this one thing ruin everything. And it's very similar to life, is when we get in a very dark space, at least for me, when I was like that, when I was going through struggling with suicidal ideation, self-harm, it really was the only way to make things better is to end your life, when really it's those thoughts that are telling you that and overwhelming. And it was how I felt in that situation of I'm going to quit everything. And I remember, I can tell you that things always happen for a reason and life plays out the way it plays out. Because again, we were on our honeymoon, we were in Rome. So we were gone for a month for the honeymoon. So we were gone in Europe. So it was Italy, Paris, and Greece. But we were at a dinner in Rome. And I'm sitting there at this dinner and it's all these travelers just at a house. It's super cool. And everyone's talking and introducing themselves. And I remember they're like, what do you do for work? And at the time I worked for a tech company. I worked for different software companies, helping them with sales for their online reputation management. So I started saying that, and my husband jumps in, interrupts me. And he's like, okay, no. He's like, she has this podcast. She wrote this book. And I was just like, oh, like, don't. And then this guy across was like, wait, what did you write? What's your book about? So he's asking me all these questions, like back and forth. And I was just like answering them. But then I was like, so what are you doing in Rome? Like, why are you here? And he was like, well, I'm speaking at a conference in Romania. And I was like, okay, what are you speaking about? And he said he was speaking about habits. And I just had this moment where I was like, interesting. And I just looked at him and I was like, did you write the book Atomic Habits? And then his friend starts laughing and he's like, dude, she just called you out. And it was James Clear who wrote Atomic Habits, like sitting across from me. And then I was just in that moment, because I literally told him, I was like, I was going to quit everything tonight. Like, this is before we came to this dinner, I was going to shut down all my accounts, make an announcement. And he was like, you need to understand. He's like, he was telling me something. He's like, it took me 5 years of having my blog before I got this book deal. And then he's like, broke down this whole timeline. And he's like, you can always stop something, and you don't, it doesn't mean, and it just, this conversation just really showed me like, and I feel like if that had not happened, I would have stopped doing all the stuff. And we would have met at Scottsdale Run Club, but I wouldn't tell you that I wouldn't have the podcast. I would not have said any of that. So that's just a story to show you guys that you don't need to quit everything. You don't need to quit when everything feels overwhelming. Just look at what is it that's really causing you that feeling, right? And for me at the time, it was coaching. And it's not to say that I won't ever go back to that, but it just didn't feel like a fit at the time for me. And even though people were, this is helping, I just was like, I don't really want to, I don't feel called to stay in this, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't care about the money. You know, it's like people like, oh, you're making that. I don't care. I care if it feels aligned. And I know it's making an impact, but like, it's not aligned for me right now. So I'm going to step away from it and do what I am passionate about. So that's just really, again, a story and a reminder for you guys of, you don't have to quit every single thing that when it feels overwhelming, but you can give yourself the opportunity to like dig deeper into what is causing this and move that away or set that away. So
you hear that, guys? She's living proof right there. No excuses now.
No excuses.
What does the future look like for your business? There's probably so many people that are wondering that. They're like, thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. But the future for my business. So really what I'm focused on the most right now is speaking. So I actually ended up resigning from my job that I told you about previously. So working for different software companies. And it wasn't because I didn't enjoy the work and I didn't love it. I did. It was great. I was very passionate about that as well. But really, what has always been my driving purpose and passion in life is this work that I do on the podcast, the stories that I tell from my own lived experience inside of my book, and the stories that I tell on the podcast, but then also speaking for different events, for different organizations, and really highlighting how to overcome the shame that we feel, how to overcome stigma, how to dismantle the roots of what is keeping these things flourishing, so we can actually instead work into flourishing what you need to build up and continue to grow and prosper in areas that you feel you can't. So I have different keynotes that I do. So really what's next for me is continuing to speak out and share this messaging. And I have a conference that I'm going to be speaking at coming up soon that I'll share some details for. I did one in Denver, Colorado that was so amazing. And I met so many people there that I was able to connect with, and really just it was just an incredible opportunity. But I think what's next for me is really focusing on that. I will still continue to do the podcast. That's not ever going to go anywhere. And the book is always around and available on Audible and on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, hardcover, all of the things. But really what's next for me is continuing to share that message, because again, it's stepping into the things that scare you the most. And really, it does still scare me a little bit to get up in front of people and speak on stages, but I love it. It brings me peace weirdly in the moment when I'm up there, because I used to have such a fear of public speaking. Like even when I was in like high school and college, I remember when they would make you read out loud and I would like run to the bathroom so I wouldn't have to be called on. But now it's just like, it really shows me that it's making a difference for people and it's helping people, because I'm having people come up in the audience and share their takeaways or what sticks out for them, or opportunities that they have coming up that they want me to come and share. So I think again, it's moving into what is making you uncomfortable, because I'm not going to continue to grow if I just stay where I'm at and I just say, well, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm scared, right? Or because I'm fearful. I'm going to continue to do it because I know that this is helping people and it's helping people overcome these boundaries. But again, it's helping me continue to grow and it's helping me continue to learn. These are the staple and core pieces that have helped me overcome so much of the things that I struggle with. And still to this day, right? When I'm still not having a good day, when I'm still having a bad day. And again, because life is always going to throw challenges at us. And I think a big piece is my audience has seen me through so many different phases, from all the changes of the podcast name. So really what's next for me in my business is continuing to grow the speaking business and share about these stories and also encourage other people. Like I have people reach out to me a lot too and ask, whether a lot of people tell me, you're the first podcast I've ever been on, or you're the first person who's given me hope that I can start to share my experience in whatever capacity, right? Maybe I'm going to share with my friend or my family member, but really giving people that hope and giving them the encouragement, just like I've gotten from so many mentors who've come before me, and seeing them do this for 20 years, 30 years, 10 years. And that's really what's gotten me to be able to say that this is actually something that I can do and I can turn into a career to help people. And I'm so grateful for the fact that I've been able to do that. And I've been able to do it because I pushed through the rejection. I pushed through the fear. I pushed through those unknowns and hesitations. And I've been able to do that through really knowing that I have something to say that's going to make a difference and help, and cultivating those relationships, and then connecting other people and just not being afraid.
There you go. That's what it's all about. I mean, and with those combination of things, you'd think that it's the most impossible thing ever to push through, but it's step by step, right? Taking it one day at a time. Like, obviously you overcame one thing, then you overcame the other, and now you're at this point in your life, and it's inspiring for people to witness it because, now they know they're not alone, right? Like, that's why I love how open you are about your past, because a lot of people that become successful don't talk about their past. And people don't understand, like, the most successful people have a dark past. Like, they went through a lot. Joe Rogan talks about it. It's messed up, but it's so true. And they're super educated. They're very smart, but they don't want to talk about the past. And if they would bring it up a little bit, it would actually, like, relate to a lot of people, that have an ambitious mind, but maybe they're just nervous to put themselves out there. So
right. So, I mean, you said it right there. I mean, so many people who, are successful, become successful. They have these things that have happened to get them to where they are, but it's just sharing that, it's sharing the roadmap. It's showing, this is what I did. This is where I started at. Right. And I mean, that's the thing, is life is only getting started. It's only the beginning. There's so much of life that hasn't even happened yet, and things that our best days haven't even happened yet. Many of them. Right. So there's so much out there, and it's really just holding on to that, but then cultivating your support network, cultivating things that help you. And really, we all have had moments where we felt stress, overwhelm, shame, fear, all these things, but really tapping into, what do I need to put into my daily routine so I don't have this stuff coming up anymore, right? And I actually went and I do have a free resource that I did create. And I have one specifically. So it is for people who are living with bipolar. It's a free bipolar wellness workbook. And then I have another one just for anyone in general. You don't have to be someone living with mental illness or bipolar or even doing work in the field. I have a free self-care guide that I created that really asks you questions and helps you to tap into, what do you need to do, but then also lay it out. So that way, once you walk through the entire guide, you literally have exactly what you need. And you can hang it up on your wall, on your phone, like you can see it and you can remember, this is what I want to include in my daily routine, but then say, hey, I don't need to get to every single thing. I would like to, this is my ideal, what I would like to, but then you can piece it together piece by piece to specialize it to you. And that's really what I've done to be able to just take care of myself and continue to make mental health a priority, because, obviously with so many changes in life and new beginnings and good things, bad things, we need to continue to prioritize ourselves. So I do have those free resources that I have created. And if you guys would like to access that, all you need to do is connect with me on Instagram. It is @paris.scobie. You can send me a DM and just send me the word guide, or tell me that you listen to the podcast on Conan's podcast, and I will send that over to you.
There you guys go. Free help. And again, there's no excuses. Like, I love it when educators provide free ebooks or help for their personal experiences. They don't put a price on it, because this is a way for us to actually relate and figure ourselves out. Be like, what's the problem? Let's figure it out. Let's not overthink the issue. Let's actually solve the problem, right? If we have to take a break from it, that's fine, but let's solve it. And with these ebooks, we can do that. So check them out, guys. And that wraps it up with Conan's Cave. Thank you so much, Paris, for sharing your story and opening up to us. It was just an amazing time. And I hope we can do this again.
Of course. And thank you for having me. I feel like I could just talk and get deeper into these conversations. And it was awesome. And I cannot wait for it to come out so I can share it and we continue more of these talks. Thanks for having me.